All right, thank you. Matthew Switzer is a doctoral candidate at the California Institute of Integral Studies, where he received his master's degree in philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness, and is completing a dissertation on the work of Marie-Louise von Franz. He lives in Northern California and is a volunteer and occasional contractor at the Jung Institute in San Francisco. Thank you, Matthew.
Sure. Well, thank you all so much for being here. And I was really delighted to see some of the presentations and Tanya's talk. Thank you for being here with me. Um, what I wanted to kind of do in this presentation was just share a little bit about something that was just a figure that was kind of interesting to me, and this was Simon Magus, or Simon the Sorcerer, or Simon the Magician. And I'm just gonna invite anybody to really quickly, if you've heard of this figure in maybe more depth than a sentence, I'd encourage you to just raise your hand or shake your head no, or and just see kind of who has some familiarity with this figure. Not necessarily Philemon, but Simon Magus in the Gnostic tradition. Great, so a few people. Awesome. Well, I had been exposed to this figure as an undergraduate in UC Santa Cruz. And I think during that year, Santa Cruz was voted by Fox News as the worst school in America, which I appreciated. But that was partly, I think, due to a lot of the political activism that was going on campus, as well as the sort of worldview, very anti-colonial, very feminist critiques of patriarchy, of the colony, of empire, etc. And so this would have been in 2008 when I learned of this figure that I read in Morton Smith's Jesus the Magician, in which Jesus was sort of interpreted based on the different literatures as very much corresponding to what a magician at that time would have looked like and would have acted like, um, as well as as well as presenting this other figure of Simon Magus as very nearly the same figure almost, with the exception that Simon Magus was evil, did his magic through the work of the devil, whereas Jesus performed miracles that were from the Holy Spirit. And so you had this very stark contrast between good and evil, magician and Messiah, um, and really that piqued my interest. Upon graduation, a Jungian psychologist gave me Aeon as the first Jung book to read, and I entered into graduate school to look a little bit more at Gnosticism and alchemy and the mystery religions. So anyway, so I wanted to bring a little bit about that figure as we kind of dive into the archetypal foundations of this myth. You have in 1909, Jung has this very famous dream of this multi-storied house in which, as one goes lower and lower, they get to sort of older and older epochs of time. That dream sort of became what it seems as almost a stratigraphic model of the psyche on the left, in which these archetypes, upon exploration, would find there would be deeper and deeper motifs that would run all the way down to potentially even the Paleolithic era. I think the Smith and the devil motif is very talking about metalworking, talking about bargaining with the devil for the soul, and this theme of redemption um, sort of moves all the way into uh, becomes the blueprint for the Simon Magus figure, as well as for the Faustian Goethe's Faust, which Jung would say is very much in this alchemical tradition. On the right, you have Marie-Louise von Franz's sort of bird's eye view of this volcanic eruption, one can think of it. And so you have this, I think she says it doesn't really matter if you replace A with E and going backwards, but the idea is you have these major archetypal um, energies or currents, which sort of have a branching fractal aspect to them. And so this is the themes and the ideas that come into us in dreams and fairy tales and myths, etc. On the left, you have Barbara Hanna's sort of rendition of Jung's 1925 theme or picture. And then, of course, on the right, what is the visual correlate of the seven sermons. And this is drawn as a way of really exploring, at least so far as I can tell, when Jung sort of moves into his study of Hippolytus and really sees Basilides and Simon Magus in this wider Gnostic milieu. And of course, Hippolytus is railing against the Gnostics. In doing so, he really expresses the remembered gnosis, or the remembered ideas that Simon Magus would be known for, and these ideas really factor into a number of the different Gnostic texts, especially the fall of the Sophia myth that Simon and his consort Helena would act out in the stories about them. So here's a little section of the in both Black Books and the Red Book, when Jung is where Jung's ego is I suppose listening to Philemon welcome or make an invitation to this shade. I'll just read it. Welcome to the garden, my master, my beloved, my brother. The shade replied, "O Simon Magus, or whatever your name may be, are you in my garden or am I in yours?" Philemon says, "You are, O master, in my garden. Helena, or whatever you choose to call her, and I are your servants. You can find accommodation with us. Simon and Helena have become Philemon and Bacchus, and so we are the hosts of the gods. We granted hospitality to your terrible worm, and since you come forward, we take you in. It is our garden that surrounds you." The shade answered, this is later, "I bring you the beauty of suffering. That is what is needed by whoever hosts the worm." And this concludes the Red Book, whereas the Black Book really kind of explores even further. If we're sort of looking in the myth that Jung is really seeking for himself, following the Miss Miller fantasies that he analyzes, as well as symbols of transformation or psychology of the unconscious. He, in seeking kind of his own origin, he will really come to this point in which Simon Magus is revealed to be in Philemon, and the core imagery becomes this union of opposites is then reflected in a number of his works, as well as the alchemical tradition and the esoteric traditions more generally. On the left, you have G.R.S. Mead's visualization of Simon Magus's aeonology. I believe Mead writes his book on Simon even before the Fragments of Faith Forgotten, and so this is roughly 1893, I think, and really does a great job, I think, translating from Hippolytus to try to put this in a visual way. And so this is what he puts together. And then on the right, and what I'll show you in the next few pages, are continuing with that, and really looking at how some of these images have come in over the years. And you can see, actually, I believe this is Simon Magus, and these are the demons that are sort of helping him to rise. Whereas you have the apostles, Peter and I believe it's Paul, although Philip is the one who converts Simon Magus, who are praying against the demonic forces that are rising Simon up. I'll come back to that in a second. I'll come back to that in a second. But these are some of the images, and you can see again the theme of the fall from air that is happening in front of the Emperor Nero, I believe. A number of different, and there's a tower in the story. Again, you have this this disputation between Simon Magus, again following here. Here he's actually trying to purchase the gift of laying hands in the Holy Spirit, which becomes simony. And again, this scene of confrontation in a number of different ways. Again, all the time really associating him with the devil. And in fact, just if in case you needed proof that people could fly, here are the knee impressions of the apostles from this moment in which Peter sort of displays the secrets. Simon gets upset, sort of saying they're revealing the Gnostic secrets to everybody, and therein lies the problem. So Simon Magus and Helena Gilles Quispel, don't know the pronunciation there, sort of writes at this moment where this change in consciousness is taking place. It is perfectly possible that, as tradition has it, the transition from the Jewish to the Gnostic concept of wisdom took place in the school of Simon Magus of Samaria, in the Palestinian Targum, as well as in Samaritan liturgy. Beginning was the equivalent of wisdom. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, eventually became, in his wisdom, God created the heavens and the earth. This is the premise for Simon's view, according to which Helena or Sophia emerged from God in order to create the rulers of the world, who then, however, overwhelmed and imprisoned her. So this is the fall of Sophia, but it also explains why I think in Jung's Aeon, Jung repeats this idea that that Simon was worshipped as Zeus, Helena was worshipped as Athena, because you have the same kind of wisdom sprouting from the head, from the Godhead, as the same kind of story behind the pleroma, the first thought of Sophia, who falls and is captured by the Archon. And so at the same time, you have this emergence of, if anybody's read David Ulansey's book on the Mithraic mysteries, he makes the idea that what is happening in this period is the realization of the precession of the equinoxes, namely that the Earth is on a tilt. That tilt wobbles, and that wobbling tilt has an astronomical effect that sort of makes all celestial phenomena subordinate to this larger unseen force, which in the time is personified as the god Mithras, who is ending the age of the bull or Taurus in an earlier year. And this is sort of discovered right as the age of Aries is ending, the age of Pisces is beginning, And you have and so you have all this astronomical imagery, astrological imagery, um, and you have these different months of the so-called Great Year, which is factoring into Jung's own analysis of myth and Gnostic themes as well. Over here, you can sort of see a little better. Here's Pisces right here. And so it's really beginning at that early age. You'll have a vertical fish here, a horizontal fish here. And so right sort of at this time, as Pisces is ending and Aquarius is beginning, um, you have Jung's work here, the Red Book and the Black Book's really performing that great work, I think, and doing his best to recover that worldview, which is then translated in some ways as the psychoanalytic or analytical psychological therapeutic encounter. I won't get into this, but this is sort of an evolution of the Western esoteric tradition over the course of that Piscean era. And this becomes what becomes the New Age, which Jung has a sort of big role in. So I mentioned some of these images, and in terms of the magician, in terms of the emperor and empress, in terms of the tower, in terms of all of these things, there's a lot of not just alchemical imagery in terms of the Gnostic worldview, but also imagery from the tarot as well. And the idea that I'm going to sort of end with here is something of a movement from almost a very sort of violent empire that is unjust on many levels to something of more of a utopian idea of redemption, of salvation, of a better world. And so these sort of graphs on the right, it kind of represents that opposition of something like tyranny versus the promised heaven on earth, so to speak. And the idea that, for Jung, I think within these environmental conditions that produce these psychological effects, we have in those moments these images. And the Simon Magus image really comes at a time where Christianity is both being demonized for its own role of magic with its founder separating itself from the Simon Magus tradition and demonizing that tradition, and yet you have in this union of these opposing magicians, one light, one dark, etc., a more full picture that can express some of the historical details, which I did not get to. There's ideas that Simon Magus and the writings were really meant to undermine this unjust authority, produce an alternative approach to spiritual authority, and really have an unmediated access to God, which I think is the Gnostic kind of a core theme here. Finally, I was going to get into this idea of dream practice and the idea of sort of recovering these images, integrating them, and sort of living them out. And without getting into that, over the last few years, what I had done was engaging in analysis, starting a dream book, and then putting a lot of these recurring motifs into an AI generator, which would sort of render visuals of the kind of dream motifs over a large series. Simon Magus was a figure that for me continued over and over to come in. And what I had realized was for me at least, it became this figure that allowed for an oppositional, rebellious critique of the dominant system, the dominant institutions that could be undermined through this character, and offer a kind of rejuvenation of some of these symbols. So the symbol in the middle ends up becoming a kind of alternative school that allows for the type of inquiry that is maybe absent due to some of these institutional constraints. So I'll end it there. There's a little over all over the place, I think, but I did want to just yeah, share a little bit of this just because I felt that the character was really fascinating, um, and really becomes this strange attractor in which mythology, in which fairy tales, in which alchemy, in which Renaissance magic, in which even Jung's Red Book ends up orienting itself around and sort of circumambulating around this figure until um, Jung will return to these themes in some of the later books, in which he'll actually contrast Simon Magus's great announcement with the Emerald Tablet, which ends up, I think, factoring into dreams a little bit as well. So anyway, I'll end it there. Thanks a lot, and appreciate your sticking around. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.